President Biden's visceral reaction to the horrifying images coming out of Ukraine also reflects a broader effort to isolate the Russian leader. When President Biden declared to reporters on Wednesday, almost off the cuff, that President Vladimir V. Putin was a war criminal, he was speaking from the heart, his aides said, reacting to the wrenching images of civilians, including children, being dragged, dead or disfigured, from ruins of buildings shelled by Russian forces. But he was also personalizing the conflict, in a way past presidents have avoided at moments of crisis with the United States' leading nuclear-armed adversary. And his remark underscored how personal condemnation has become policy, as Mr. Biden and his top aides frame Mr. Putin as a pariah, an indiscriminate killer who should be standing trial at The Hague. Mr. Biden amplified his attacks on Thursday, calling Mr. Putin a murderous dictator, a pure thug who is waging an immoral war against the people of Ukraine. His Secretary of State, Antony J. Blinken, chimed in, saying, "Personally, I agree. Intentionally targeting civilians is a war crime, but what began as a visceral reaction appears to reflect a strategic decision." Branding Mr. Putin as a war criminal supports the administration's case as it simultaneously tries to keep the Western alliance unified and attempts to pressure China not to bail Mr. Putin out of his economic crisis and military mistakes. That effort will face a new test on Friday when Mr. Biden is scheduled to talk to President Xi Jinping of China for the first time since the invasion, and warn him against supplying weapons to Mr. Putin. Mr. Biden's comments came after 3 weeks in which the United States and its allies piled sanctions on Russia that the administration said were intended to force Mr. Putin to withdraw his forces from Ukraine. But diplomats and intelligence officials from several countries say those sanctions are seen by Mr. Putin as an effort to stoke Russian unrest, turning both wealthy oligarchs and ordinary Russians against his rule. The White House says that regime change in Russia is not on Washington's strategic agenda. But in past cases when presidents have called national leaders war criminals, Saddam Hussein in Iraq or Bashar al-Assad of Syria, it has frequently been linked to an effort, covert or overt, to drive them from office. When promised anonymity, many American officials said that they cannot imagine that Ukraine could be safe from Russian military action while Mr. Putin, stewing in grievances and now angry at his own military's performance, is still in office. Last week, William J. Burns, the CIA director and a former U.S. ambassador to Moscow who knew Mr. Putin as he tightened his control over Russia, told the House Intelligence Committee that Mr. Putin's moves had been premeditated and savage. He predicted that Putin was likely to double down and try to grind down the Ukrainian military with no regard for civilian casualties. Quote,